Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Romania is such an amazing place where you can find out all sorts of things of how the world works. I've listened recently to a couple of interviews with a rather famous Romanian sociologist. He's from the group of sociologists that are also architects of the power structure in Romania. They're not just observers. They are involved with the manufacturing of consent, as Chomsky used to put it. So there are these people who work for the institutions that conduct surveys of the public opinion. And they are also political consultants. They advise various parties which type of candidate to come with in the elections. So they essentially do this polling where they find out the grievances of the people, and they know what to promise in the electoral campaign. I've also been involved in a political campaign. I've seen how this is done. There is absolutely no regard whatsoever for what actually needs to be done. What people want is simply taken into account in the promising making process. So in the process of manufacturing the promises. And this is how you get some sort of majority behind the candidate that wins. And of course, ever since 2004, ever since the election of Traian Băsescu as president, Romania became a colony of the United States. And this manufacturing of consent started to be done at the behest of the Americans. And this sociologist, whose interviews I watched, is one of these people who was an advisor to Traian Băsescu, and he is one of the people who is instrumental in creating and maintaining this mechanism of manufacturing the consent of the Romanian people. And from such people you can learn a lot, because they are intelligent enough to have executed this machinery that supplants democracy. And they're dumb enough to not understand the implications and to just blurt out in the open, to brag even about what they're doing and about how the system works. Not being able to understand what a colony means. And in these interviews, he details how things work. He was basically asked about the nature of the current political crisis in Romania. And without any hesitation, he described how the president is pro-American, in the sense that he wants to loot the public budget in the favor of American corporations. Of course, he did not put it in these words. He put it very euphemistically, and I'm sure he actually believes in the euphemisms he uses. He never questioned them. So he said something like, the cost of the strategic partnership is that we have to award some contracts to these corporations, like there was the Bechtel contract, where no highway was supposed to be built, just huge sums of money were supposed to be given out. And now we have to do the same. It's part of the strategic partnership, so of course we have to do it. It's in the national interest. No reason given as to why. But essentially he was saying that the pro-Europeans are traitors to the national cause, because they do not rally behind the president, who is the man of the Americans and who operates on behalf of the Americans. And the pro-Europeans want to give procurement contracts to European corporations, which is not in Romania's interest, because Romania's interest is the interest of the United States. And the United States demands from us certain things, and we must give them these things, and we must always be at the behest of the United States, because otherwise we are jeopardizing our some euphemistic cliche, like we are jeopardizing our integration on the path of becoming a more developed pro-Western country. These kinds of bullshits that they never contested. So how the Americans operated was that they scouted various talented students who were smart enough to be able to implement something, but dumb enough not to understand what its purpose is. They took them to the United States, they gave them these fellowships, these scholarships, they trained them into how to manufacture the consent of the Romanian people. And they came back as public intellectuals, and in some cases even as architects of the system. So this guy advised the president of Romania, and of course he has close ties to the domestic intelligence service, who was and is the main operator of the system. And he's very nonchalant about it. Some would say that he's cynical, but cynicism would imply that he sees these things as something bad. But no, he sees them as a feature, not as a bug. He believes that the best democracy is the one that is like in Egypt, under Hosni Mubarak. So, a democracy that is well managed by the Americans, in which that country is loyal, faithful to the Americans, and does whatever the Americans want. And the democratic process should just be curated. There should just be some people selected beforehand to respond to whatever the grievances of the public are, and to do cosplay to pretend that they want to address those grievances, but to just be the stooges of the Americans and to treat Romania as a colony. From such people you can learn a lot, because they are very honest. They do not think that what they're saying is in any way bad, that their admissions are in any way self-incriminating. So they present them very candidly, as if this is how things should be. So, for example, he said that the sovereigntist movement started with the Social Democratic Party, and around 2019 the domestic intelligence service took it over through its agents, because it was deemed a threat to Romania's whatever, the pro-European path of Romania or something, because the party would have had too much power. And of course you cannot let the elected representatives of the people have too much power. The security apparatus has to put the leader in jail and to bring the party under its control, to do the job of the Americans from that point onwards. So to just do whatever the Americans want. The event that followed was, for example, the pandemic, and of course the Social Democrats were in line with all the measures dictated from Washington, including the vaccine procurement process and the mass injecting of the population with the experimental genetic drugs. And probably it was regarded to be part of the transatlantic partnership, part of the strategic alliance, and part of the the special relationship that we have with the Americans. I mean, you cannot let the great unwashed, the filthy masses get in the way of the noble partnership with the United States, right? If the United States wants something from us, then the interest of Romania, the national interest, is to give it to them. And if that means jeopardizing the, I don't know, the bodily integrity of some millions of unwashed people from the general population, then so be it. Because the state apparatus and the security system function to protect the national interest, which they define to be the interest of the United States. So if you have domestic grievances, domestic interests, that's just populism and corruption, and you have to be sent to jail if you persist in addressing them. So apparently Liviu Dragnea, the head of the Social Democrats, wanted to do a bit more than just cosplay. Their role, as it had been explained to them, and as his successors closely follow, is to just pretend that they care. And they have legal immunity, they cannot be criminally prosecuted. It doesn't matter what kind of dodgy dealings they do, they stay out of problems with the law. But they just have to do whatever they are told. So whatever the security apparatus tells them, at the behest of the Americans, they have to do. And this is how it works. And some might say, as the reporter also, well, he has the IQ of a banana. He has the IQ of something like 70, because he's a prominent reporter of a mainstream media outlet in Romania, and probably their collective IQ reaches 100 if they add them up on a good day. So his banana IQ made him say something like, But that's not very democratic. And the sociologist said, of course it's not. It's That's not the purpose. It's not meant to be democratic. You cannot have the filthy, unwashed masses dictate state policy. State policy is too important to leave it to the unwashed. And this is the logic behind it, right? The hoi polloi, the great toothless masses. So this is the architecture of power in Romania, and it's so out in the open because the uneducated public, the great majority, know that it's like this, and they know they cannot do anything about it, because whenever they try, their vote is subsequently co-opted or annulled. Either the elections get cancelled, or their elected officials get arrested for corruption, and some stooges of the Americans are put in their place. And the elites are dumb enough to just listen to this and to buy it and to think that it's a good thing. For example, this sociologist is also behind the Snow White political project, as it was regarded then. So around the time of, I think, 2012, when the austerity measures of the pro-American regime of Traian Băsescu were very harsh, and essentially the entire political class had become delegitimized, he wrote a column in a cultural magazine. And he said that his sociology research tells him that Romanians want a new political force that is made up of politicians that come from the private sector, that had not been in politics until then. So he basically urged the system, the pro-Western system, which is the euphemism for the domestic intelligence service, to gather their collaborators from various private companies and to manufacture some CVs for them, and to have them as the saviors, the Union Save Romania party. And this is how it was concocted. If you're interested in the history of this project, you can look up Sebastian Lăzăroiu, Partidul Albă ca Zăpada. He co-authored this concept together with Cristian Ghinea, who became the political implementer. So he was the guy from the civil society who went on to do the party, to create it. Well, not from the first wave, but this was, generally speaking, the architecture of that party. And I was a member of this party, this Renew Europe type of Macron affiliate in Romania. And the ethos of that party, among other disturbing things, was that the members were first and foremost, the members were convinced of several contradictory things. So basic logic would have told them that what they believe is contradictory, and that it cannot be both this way and the opposite way. So they considered themselves to be the epitome of democracy. They considered themselves to be the political force that saves Romanian democracy, and the political force that is the most democratic. So there is no party more democratic than them. At the same time, they also held the belief that the majority of Romanians are simply imbeciles, corrupt, and they should not be let to decide the direction of the country. So their vote should be hindered as much as possible. The political parties that they vote for should be outlawed. The outcome of the political process should be, one way or another, curated, so as to prevent the majority of the Romanians to have their way. They also regarded themselves as being the elite, even though many of them did not have finished university degrees. Some of them had lied in their CVs about graduating various universities abroad, which they had not. But they still regarded themselves as the elite, because the public intellectuals, who also are part of this complex, are part of this web of influence in Romanian society, said so. So basically, the people who receive grants from the US Embassy and who function as public intellectuals said that this party is the party of the intellectual elite, and it didn't matter that the people who were members of that party and who were the leaders of that party had very poor education and poor qualifications, and they just were some collaborators of the domestic intelligence service from some front that they had mimicking a private company, or that they were inserted in corporations. They were regarded to be the elite because the web of public intellectuals regarded them to be the elite, and they regarded themselves to be the elite and to be much better than people with education and people with a real work record and professional background and so on. So for them, for for them, having the majority of the Romanian people either not voting or subverting their vote was not a threat to democracy. On the other, it was the opposite. It was a feature, not a bug. So this was not something to be fought against. This was something to be fought for. And this guy, this sociologist, and many like him, I mean, I was surrounded by such people, and I've heard this type of discourse a lot. They truly believe that Romania should somehow function at the behest of these foreign corporations and of these foreign interests, because this is what civilization means. They truly believe it. They're so dumb, they're so imbecilic, that they truly believe, for example, I mean, if the United States Embassy told them to, and told the Romanian state in general, to gather some tens of thousands of children to be fucked on the Epstein Island for the American Epstein class, the American political class and the business class. So just like in the Middle Ages, the Romanians would be forced to send their children to the Ottoman Janissary unit, this component of the Ottoman army, which was made up of the children of the enslaved people. If the U.S. Embassy dictated that Romanians send their children to be fucked on the Epstein Island, these scholarship recipients from the United States who cosplay as public intellectuals would say that this is what civilization means. If the United States demands something from us, we should do, and whoever doesn't want to do it is in the service of Russia. He also said that the elections were annulled, not because Georgescu was a Russian asset. He said, this is just something we have to say, We cannot say that we cannot allow the democratic process to take place. But he actually said that the democratic process cannot go the way that the majority of the Romanians might want, because the majority of the Romanians are just dumb, illiterate, and they jeopardize the direction of the country. So when you have your population jeopardizing the direction of your country, of course you have to take measures, right? You have to take action. You cannot just allow the great unwashed to steer the country in a direction that satisfies their needs and their aspirations. No. The population is a liability. This is why Romania functions as a colony, but if you say that, that's a pro-Russian take. You should say it like the pro-Europeans or like the pro-Americans. So they do not say that Romania functions as a colony. They describe the way it functions, which is as a colony, and they call it differently. They call it something nice. They use a euphemism. They say it's enhanced democracy. So we select the people who run for office, we curate the debate, he even went on to say that the leader of the sovereigntist camp essentially sabotaged his own campaign so as to ensure the victory for the current president, because he's also blackmailed and this is what you have to do. So you have to create a political movement. Romanians want sovereigntism, therefore you have to create a political movement out of the blackmailed collaborators of the domestic intelligence service to channel this public opinion. You cannot have the public opinion channeled in uncontrolled directions, right? So in order to have the will of the people going also towards satisfying the interests of the United States, you have to curate a political movement with blackmailed people, and you have to to have them act out that they are heterosexual and that they are patriotic, so as to have the Romanians vote for them. This is essentially what he was saying. And what I wanted to say is that if you point out the fact that this type of description is that of a colony, it is not that of a country going in the direction of a flourishing democracy. No, it's a country that is held in servitude, that is held in bondage, and is exploited to the interests of the patron, of the owner, and its interests are not even known to the even to the administrators of the colony. So, for example, the fact that Romania might be used as a strategic rear for the war in Ukraine is not perhaps something that the Americans might share with the handlers of the Romanian political class. They might just curate everything without disclosing what the final objective is, because when you have something to instrumentalize, when you just have something to be used, that something doesn't have to know also the purposes to which it is used. And if these people cannot question those purposes and all they do is take orders, then you have a very easy job handling them. And people like this guy would object that it's a Russian narrative to say that Romania is a colony, but he makes sure that Romania is one, and he would describe it very euphemistically as some sort of pro-Western managed democratic process to ensure that populism doesn't hijack its direction, something along those lines. And to the benefit of these interests, which are somehow in our interest and are somehow convergent with our national security and so on. And actually, it's the same with many things. So if you Google chemtrails, if you look up chemtrails on the internet, Google will tell you you're an idiot. You're a conspiracy theorist. This is something that uneducated people believe in. There's no such thing. If you look up stratospheric aerosol injection for climate change mitigation, you'll find scientific papers describing it. It's chemtrails. But, chemtrails implies what? Pulverizing some sort of aluminium salts, or I don't know what type of aerosols that stay in the stratosphere and that bounce solar radiation back into the cosmos. So prevents the overheating of the planet, prevents the absorption of the solar radiation, it reflects it back, and this is its purpose. If you look up aerosol injection, stratospheric aerosol injection for climate change mitigation, it describes it, but it doesn't say that conspiracy theorists call it chemtrails. It just describes it. It congratulates you for being on the side of science, for being a very intelligent and educated person, so as to read those academic journals describing the process and describing how it is done, how there are federal programs in the United States doing it, and so on and so forth. But if you don't know the exact terminology and you don't know what to look for, and you just look for chemtrails because this is what they are trails and they are chemical, then you'll find out that you are an idiot, and everybody will point fingers at you, calling you an idiot and uneducated and so on. It's the same with Romania's managed democracy process. If you tell the pro-European voters, if you tell the educated class in Romania that Romania is a colony, they will immediately label you a Russian disinformant, a Russian propagandist, and they will call for your arrest. But if you tell them that Romania is a managed society with a democratic process which is foolproof for populism and which cannot be hijacked by the will of the majority of the people, they will say, sounds great, I want more of that, give me two, So this is Romania's curse. It has elites which are intelligent enough to be able to implement social engineering on behalf of the colonial master, but retarded enough not to realize the implications of Romania's colonial status. So to realize the implications of what they're doing. And this is what unfortunately jeopardizes Romania a lot, and this is what makes change impossible. And this is what unfortunately will lead Romania to be the most probable destination that the United States might want it to become, which is an extension of its Ukraine proxy. Just like if the United States gains such absolute control over the society of the Philippines, it will have it get on the side of Taiwan as soon as the Sino-Taiwanese war breaks out, or just like the U.S. has complete control over Japanese society, and Japan a few months ago extended security guarantees to Taiwan all of a sudden, even though Japan formally doesn't even have an army. So yeah, this is what happens when you're a complete colony of the United States. Unfortunately, the Romanian political class and the so-called public influencers, public intellectuals are not smart enough to understand the consequences of what they're doing, and this will lead to our demise. In this optimistic note, I will end it here. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to support me financially, you'll find the link in the channel description how to do so. Until next time, take care.